Imagine you are a student and visiting a foreign country for the very first time. But instead of having a good time there, you suddenly have to fear for your life in the cruelest way possible.
I entirely beg you, people and government of the DPR Korea, for your forgiveness.
That's exactly what happened in 2016 to a young American named Otto Warmbier, who suddenly found himself in court after a tourist stay in North Korea. But not only that, these recordings mark the beginning of the end of Otto Warmbier's life. Because in North Korea, he had previously done something that seemed unbelievable. Today, we'll tell you the incredible story of an innocent man who came face to face with one of the cruelest regimes of our time. But before we get into the bizarre punishments Otto Warmbier received for what was practically a ridiculous offense, we first want to briefly explain in this video who this young American actually was. A man who never even planned to travel to North Korea. Otto Warmbier was born in 1994 in Ohio, and up until the start of his studies, he was considered a model student, with many saying he would go very far in life. During his studies, he was not only extremely diligent, but in 2015, he also took an opportunity that was supposed to greatly boost his resume and enrich his intercultural experience. He enrolled for a semester abroad at a university in Hong Kong. There, he studied for several months, just like hundreds of other exchange students. But at the end of 2015, an opportunity arose that would turn into the most fatal decision of his life. A Chinese travel agency offered him and 10 other students the chance to take a short trip over New Year's to perhaps the most isolated and mysterious country in the world. North Korea. Although Warmbier had never before wanted to set foot in the isolated country, he spontaneously decided to join because many of his friends and fellow students were going, and they hoped for an exciting time, which they would indeed get. Otto also wanted to see North Korea for himself and check whether the negative portrayal in the media was accurate. However, his parents urged him over the phone not to travel to the country. And with good reason. Since its conflict with its southern neighbor in the 1950s, North Korea has been one of the most feared dictatorships in the world. Since 1948, the Kim family has ruled there with an iron fist, suppressing any resistance from the people. Nowhere is it more difficult to speak freely than there, and the state interferes in nearly every aspect of the lives of its citizens and visitors. This was the case as well for Otto Warmbier and his fellow travelers. Despite the warnings, Otto decided to travel with the group, and so the 10 students finally landed on the evening of December 29th, 2015. They immediately realized that in North Korea, different rules applied than in the rest of the world. Instead of simply walking out of the airport, they were immediately accompanied by an official who took them on a tailor-made tour. The official ensured that the tourists only saw what they were supposed to see. Instead of sending images of poor citizens to the outside world, the government preferred to spread footage of their pompous buildings or smiling residents. At no point during their trip was the group around Warmbier allowed to move freely. They were constantly monitored. At first, however, this didn't seem to bother them too much. After all, they only wanted to leave after a few days without causing much of a stir. But everything changed on New Year's Eve 2015. During a big dinner with plenty of alcohol, Warmbier and his friends really went wild. They were in a small restaurant and drank large amounts of soju, a traditional Korean rice wine. For the group, it was the first opportunity to feel completely uninhibited, since on that particular evening the official who was supposed to monitor them was not present. But it was exactly this mindset that became their downfall. Because even when they returned to their hotel, they felt as if they were back in a normal, free country. Eventually, they came up with the idea to take part in a challenge that is a widespread legend among tourists in North Korea, the so-called Fifth Floor Challenge. This challenge claims that on the fifth floor of the Yanggakdo International Hotel, there is a secret floor that is actually off-limits to guests. Whether this myth is true or not has never really been confirmed. That evening, the group decided that with no one following them, they would try the challenge. And so Otto and two fellow students went exploring, and indeed they actually found the supposedly hidden fifth floor. There, they discovered all kinds of surveillance equipment recording every activity in the hotel. While his friends snapped a few photos and left the floor again, Otto went one step further. On the fifth floor, there were also old North Korean propaganda posters from past decades, which held great traditional significance for the government. Otto then tore one of these posters off the wall to take it home as a souvenir. Afterward, he left the floor and went to his room. What he didn't know was that near the poster there was also a camera that captured his act. The next day, Otto Warmbier went to Pyongyang Airport to fly back to Hong Kong. But while all his fellow students were boarding, suddenly two North Korean policemen approached Otto. They pointed at him and pulled him out of the group. Then they took him to the station, and what happened next still shocks the world to this day. One day after his arrest, when all his fellow travelers had already left the country, Otto Warmbier found himself in a courtroom full of cameras broadcasting live on North Korean television. In this trial, he was accused of committing an anti-state act that not only undermined North Korea's authority, but also supposedly made him the #1 enemy of the state. However, the TV reports remained silent about what he had actually done. The just 21-year-old Otto Warmbier was then taken to an unknown location for 6 weeks. During this time, neither the American government nor Warmbier's family could establish any contact with him. Only on February 29, 2016, 6 weeks after the incident, did Warmbier reappear in public. This time, he was at a staged press conference, and he was forced to read the following.
I understand the severity of my crime, and I have no idea what sort of penalty I may face. I have been very impressed by the Korean government's humanitarian treatment of severe criminals like myself.
Warmbier confessed to his theft and claimed that North Korea was a country that punished criminals like him with exemplary methods. What many did not know at the time was that his entire apology had been dictated by the North Korean authorities and that he was forced to deliver it under duress, but it got even worse.
Please, I have made the worst mistake of my life.
In tears, he begged for forgiveness. According to international observers, he did this because he already suspected what awaited him in the coming weeks. Instead of extraditing Warmbier to the US after this apology, the worst thing that Warmbier could have imagined happened. He was sentenced to 15 years in prison. However, this was not just any punishment, but the one that in North Korea is reserved only for the worst enemies, the so-called hard labor. Hard labor means that as a convict, you must perform the hardest physical labor non-stop, every day of the week, under completely inhumane conditions in the prison camp. All of this is accompanied by pure psychological terror and also physical violence if you do not comply with the guards' orders. Very few survive these conditions for more than a few weeks. Meanwhile, Warmbier's parents in the US tried everything to somehow bring their son home. They even reached out to the White House, and both former President Barack Obama and his successor, Donald Trump, demanded that the Pyongyang government release Warmbier. Although the two most powerful men in the world condemned Kim Jong-un and drew global attention to Warmbier's fate, nothing happened. It was only 2 years later that his family heard something about Otto Warmbier. At the beginning of 2017, North Korea announced that Warmbier's health had massively deteriorated for unknown reasons, and that he was now in the hospital. A North Korean official claimed on state television that Otto had induced a coma in himself with a pill in order to escape hard labor. But for the American government, it was clear that Warmbier's horrific condition was the result of the poor prison conditions in North Korea. Since Donald Trump at the time was increasingly in contact with Kim Jong-un, and even pushed for improved relations between the two countries, North Korea finally relented after nearly 18 months and released Otto Warmbier. He was then flown immediately to one of the best clinics in America. But for Otto himself, unfortunately, nothing was the same anymore. Despite the best medical treatment, Warmbier was in a vegetative state, unable to speak, move, feel, or think properly. Doctors examined him with the most advanced methods and determined that in North Korea, Warmbier's brain had likely been deliberately deprived of oxygen over several months, which is not only extremely agonizing but also almost inevitably leads sooner or later to death. And this very grim fear finally came true on June 19th, 2017. Due to his miserable physical condition, Otto Warmbier died without ever speaking another word to his family. To this day, even the best forensic experts are unsure of what exactly was done to him in North Korea and under what conditions he was held during his imprisonment. What is certain, however, is that because of a small misstep, his entire life was stolen from him in the most horrific way. But even though Otto's life was already over, the case afterward became increasingly significant in politics. Immediately after his death, Donald Trump imposed a multitude of sanctions on North Korea. Since this incident, Americans have also no longer been permitted to visit North Korea, and the diplomatic relations that had only recently improved deteriorated dramatically because of Otto's death. Otto's parents even sued the state of North Korea, and although a US court ruled in their favor, they will probably never receive the $500 million in compensation they were awarded. All of this simply because Otto, an ordinary student, wanted to take a poster. Share your opinion about the case in the comments below, and thanks for watching.